that's the point of, I think, life is you never know what's going to help somebody, some stranger, somebody else out in your life. So it's really, I love seeing people just be in their genius and be awesome at what they do. So much fun.
The future of dentistry belongs to the innovators. Welcome to Innovation in Dentistry. I'm your host, Sean Zayas, and I believe that the future of dentistry is going to be unbelievably great over the next decade and 2 decades. But the question isn't that.
The question is, are you going to be part of what makes dentistry great?
So I'm beyond excited today to have the opportunity to interview Dino Watt. So Dino, before I set you up, let me just say thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Okay, so innovation can mean a ton of different things. And I say this, so I'm just going to be quick. We're not talking about clinical innovation. We're not really primarily talking about technological innovation. We're talking about what is it that gives dental professionals that permission to just step up and say, like, why not me? Why can't I be the solution to the problems that are in dentistry? And you see hygienists and dentists that start their own software companies or take the stage, and they end up pioneering positive change in dentistry. You, if I'm not mistaken, you have no dental background. Is that correct? You're not a dental professional.
I went to the dentist often growing up. I had braces, and I go every 6 months. So there you go. That's my experience.
So if it's possible that someone doesn't know Dino, you are doing something right now that is incredibly innovative and transformative in dentistry. But before we talk about that, how did you get into dentistry?
Well, you mean working in dentistry, right?
Yes.
I got into dentistry because my mom made me go, and I hated it. And I'm seriously, I was the kid that in my home, I had a cavity at least one every time I went to the dentist. So it wasn't a very fun experience for me. So to be in this industry is very, very interesting. I actually was working with a financial planner here in Utah. I had a program called the Business of Marriage, where I helped higher end entrepreneurs in their marriage put the same business principles they would put in their successful business into their marriage, because oftentimes I'd come across people who just were doing great in their business, but their marriages were not doing well. And so I ended up working with a financial planner here in Utah, helping him in his marriage, and it was super successful. And he came to me and said, hey, all of my clients, money is the number one source of divorce in our world. And so we always end up they end up arguing about their marriage in front of me. I don't know how to help them. You do. Why don't I send them to you and you help them in their marriage, and then I'll help them with their money the way that I want to. I was like, great. That's a cool setup. So he would send me, the majority of his clients were chiropractors, dentists, and orthodontists, mostly chiropractors and dentists. And so he sent me a couple of chiropractors, a couple of dentists. And one day, one of the dentists out of Kansas that I was helping said, hey, this is working really, really good, but I'm married to like 8 other work wives in my office. Can you help me communicate with them? Can you help me connect with them? And this is on the back of, I'd always been a student of business. I ran a company in Los Angeles for a long time that I helped build up. And so I just had some kind of street smart business ideas. And I was a huge student of every business book I could think of. And I went out to his office, just kind of looked at some of the things that he was doing and going, why are you doing that? What's up with that? And I was looking at it from a non-dentistry, non-practitioner side and purely business. And that led to another doctor who was an orthodontist who happened to be a very big KOL in the ortho industry at the time. I didn't know that. Same idea, helped him with his marriage, then came into his office. And he just came to me and said, Dino, no one's doing this in our space at all. No one's talking like you. No one's, we have consultants who've been around for a long time, and seems like everybody's kind of teaching the same thing, but just a different voice. Your voice is completely different and what you're teaching is different. You should come in our industry. And I said what you asked. I don't know anything about orthodontics. I don't know anything about dentistry. And he said, it doesn't matter. The principles are the principles. You're teaching principles. Just teach those. People will want it. And he got me on a stage in a study club, then another study club, and then the AAO called asking me to speak there. And it just snowballed. So here we are over a decade later. That I often tell people the short answer to your question is, well, I made up a job, then I wrote a book about it, and then now I do it. So.
Okay, so you kind of alluded to it right at the end there. You said over a decade ago. So specifically, when was this transition from former life Dino, which I do want to get into, to all of a sudden helping dentists with their marriages?
Oh, so former life Dino into marriages was I left. So I'm born and raised California. We left California in 2006. And that's when I first started formulating the idea of the business of marriage. And I was doing a lot of real estate at the time, and I taught a course. And on one of the evaluation forms of the course, I said, hey, I'm also thinking about doing a course on, rehabs and something else and marriage. Which are you interested in? And overwhelmingly, people were like, marriage, marriage, marriage. So my wife and I started that course. It was about 2007 and 8 is when I first started the business of marriage course. And then did that until I still do it a little bit, but transitioned into ortho in 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's pretty clear from my perspective that you are an entrepreneur, visionary, serial entrepreneur. Is that something that just you always knew, hey, this is just the way I'm wired coming out of college or high school, whatever, and I'm just going to chart my own path?
Well, I never knew what it was called. I didn't know entrepreneurism was the thing it was called. I just knew sitting in high school, there was no way I was going to sit in a cubicle and work inside of an office. And I thought I was going to be a performer, an actor in Hollywood. I grew up in California. I was down in Hollywood all the time. And if I would have had my way, my parents would have let me be a child star actor, right? But that wasn't going to happen. My stepdad was an entrepreneur. He had a concrete company, and we worked with him every summer doing concrete. My dad was kind of like a part-time entrepreneur. He was a cop his whole life, but always had a side job, always had some sort of, a car wash at one point, and did spec home. So I saw that, but I didn't know what it was called. I had, my lawn mowing service when I was a kid. I was so mad because my buddy Josh got the paper route for our area, and he was making money. Like he was making crazy money, like $150 a month. Right. And I was like, I want that job. So I did work. I just didn't know what it was called. Nobody told me that it was called entrepreneurism. And I didn't go to college. I went to college, but I got a degree in makeup artistry, whole nother story. And I just knew I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to be in control of me, which is super scary over the last 50 years. But that's all I knew. I just wanted to work for myself.
Okay. Don't you also have some sort of expertise in like body language?
Yeah. So when we moved here, we ended up going and I took a course on body language with a gentleman, and there's this whole story around it. But my wife and I ended up joining his company and building his company up. And in a year, we went from gross revenue of $100,000 to $1 million in a year. And we just helped build that up. And I fell in love with the idea of how to communicate with people in a way where you can ask better questions. And that's what our basis of all body language is. So I still teach that when I go into offices of how to ask a better question of people. Here's some key triggers you can do to ask better questions. So.
Okay. So it seems like you are a really gifted communicator, but you also must have had really high emotional intelligence to feel safe in this educator role to actually help people with like marriages, right? Like, that's no easy, hey, by the way, come on in here and get in the middle of the male female dynamics. And then just like, that's crazy.
Well, and it was something I was really worried about, scared about doing. I wanted to do it for years. When I was first married with my wife, we were the couple that all of our friends would come over and stay up till way too late at night talking about their marriage, and them going, how come you don't hate each other? Like, how come you guys are happy? How come? And when my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and I tell the story from stage often about standing on a sidewalk watching my father drive away, and the feeling of frustration of in my 8-year-old mind going, I know how to fix your marriage. Like, Dad, I know why mom gets upset. Mom, I know why dad gets upset, but I'm 8, right? So nobody's going to listen to me. So when I was first married and we were doing this with our friends, I specifically remember having a excuse me, a moment with my wife. We were at a local community center, and there was a flyer for it was like a boot camp for dads, how to be a great dad. It was in Burbank, California. And I remember seeing it going like, I want to do that for marriage. We'd been married, I want to say 5 years at that point. And the logical brain came in going, who's going to listen to somebody who's been married for 5 years? Like, okay, you've been married 5 years. You know how to have a strong marriage. But the secret is that my wife and I were very thorough about the things we talked about before we got married. We had very specific conversations. We had very specific processes we put into place to help build upon our marriage. Because I didn't want to end up like my parents. Both my parents divorced 3 times in a row. And, I just didn't want to do that. And so I was very intentional about it. And it kind of came through organically, and it is bold. It is something, but I enjoy it so much. I love people. And to your note about the emotional intelligence, I didn't know that was what it was called back then either, but I was that guy in high school who definitely way friend zoned, right? With all the girls I liked and even the girls that I didn't like, but I still was friend zoned because I was the relationship guy. People would come to me, hey, this guy tells me if I really love him, he'll sleep with, I'll sleep with them, and my parents are going to be awake, and what should I do? Do you know? And, oh, this guy, all the stuff. I was that guy, and I got along with everybody. I was really easy to get along with the heavy metal dudes and the nerds and the jocks, because I was just open to everyone. I just really like people. So.
Well, there's a few things that fascinate me about that story. One is that we typically start off by growing in any area by modeling, right? You start off by looking at someone that's a hero, and you just model behavior. And here you are, and you have parents that have been divorced 3 different times. Like, you can't model that if you want to separate yourself from that outcome. Right. So right off the bat, as an 8-year-old, you're already understanding, oh my gosh, I can't be like my heroes in this way. So I'm almost on my own. That must have been difficult for an 8-year-old to process. What do I do when my heroes kind of just disappointed me?
Yeah, it was very much so, but it also made me immediately think, how do I take this and not become that? Right. I've always been able to see things of the end result and go, do I want to go towards that or the exact opposite? And I'm a 3rd child, right? I'm really the middle. I have 2 older brothers, a younger sister, and then I have 2 younger stepbrothers. But there's this idea that they joke about the 3rd child. I actually have a joke about it in one of my speeches. I just had to look at the world a little differently because I had to figure it out. And I just saw it as an example. And there were years for sure where I was very frustrated at my parents and angry at my dad. He left and basically was like, hey, if you want to see me, let me know. I'm like, I'm 8, right? You're not going to call me. Right. And I felt like I was abandoned that way. And it took years for me to understand everybody has their own way of coping with trauma and challenges in life. And mine was, all right, I'll figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I don't want that. I want this. I like being the odd duck too. I'm totally different than anybody in my family. I don't think half my family knows what I do for a living. It's just, I like that. I like not having rules and trying stuff. And that's for good or ill, right? Because a lot of stuff doesn't work out.
Dino, that's crazy because, most people don't think that way. Most people actually don't like the problems that freedom give you. Wait, if I actually have the freedom to better my situation today in every sort of way, that's kind of scary because it's super insecure. Tell me that there's a proven path and that there's bumpers, like we're bowling, so I can't go off course, and that there's some sort of certainty in outcome.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize, well, you're never going to pioneer if those conditions don't exist for a pioneer. You're always going into uncharted waters. Now, one thing I'm also super curious about, I've noticed that when someone's gifted, that when they're still immature with that gifting, it's hard for them to almost receive from someone else, because most people in their books about marriage, they're not communicating to someone that already has understanding. So
Yep.
it's like almost frustrating to be like, okay, you're talking as if I'm Homer Simpson, but I'm not.
Mm.
At what point did you realize, like, wow, I have a gift, but if I submit this gift to, more training, whatever, I can be like world class instead of just like good? Like, did you ever go through
Yeah.
that maturing where you're just like, you know what, I'm already good, but I want to be great? Because I mean, it seems like you're great at what you do.
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question. I don't actually think about this that often, but I think the first time I really recognized there was a way to improve upon what I naturally could do.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I don't think I really recognized the natural side of it until later on. But now that I look back on it, my I lived in Japan when I was from 19 to 21 years old, and I lived full time there and loved it there. And I came home, and within 3 weeks, I was living in downtown Los Angeles, like Skid Row, Los Angeles, because I was going to go be an actor. I lived in this terrible cockroach infested apartment. It was like, when I say Skid Row, if anybody who's listening knows Los Angeles, I was on 6th and Wall. And back in the 80s or 90s, there was a big Rampart scandal with the police. I was a block away from all that. It was terrible.
Wow.
And my stepdad, for some reason, had purchased the late night infomercial, had purchased the Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within set of CDs or DVDs, or they weren't DVDs back then, they were cassette tapes. And he hadn't really done anything with them. And he gave them to me as I was going down there, as I was going to live on my own there. And I remember listening to the very first one and hearing this guy talk and be like, wow, I totally get this. And even some things that he was saying, that I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, it seemed obvious to me. I think that was probably my first foray into it. And then when I got into real estate, for sure, I had a lot more people that I was able to hear from and understand around increasing your emotional intelligence, understanding how people work. I'm fascinated by neuroscience. I'm fascinated by how people tick, what makes people tick, influence. And I think that's where it started, in realizing how I didn't have normal formal education, and this needed to be the education I need to lean into. So that was really it. And I do see how every time, it's so funny. I was just listening to this today. I had to take a trip about 40 minutes away from my home, and I'm re-listening to a book. And I was thinking about it as I was listening to it, that every time I listen to a book, I get inspired in so many different ways to improve upon things I'm already doing in my business or for myself. And I think that clicked for me at one point. And so I just kept leaning into it. And by the way, I have dyslexia. I was a terrible reader. I can't spell worth the beans. Like, I have a rule when I train that if I spell it on the board, it's correct. Just go with it, right? As long as you can sound it out, just go with it. But I'm an avid reader now. And that was not the case when I was growing up at all. I hated reading because I was made to feel dumb. I went into the red reading group, right? So I guess that answers your question. That, yeah, that's why I really felt like it was back then. I remember just, ooh, this connects with me.
I tell dental practices and dentists, like, the strongest place you can ever be in moving forward is when you find a way to connect, like, authentically to almost who you are. Because as an original, that's the strongest differentiation you can own in the marketplace. It creates the biggest moat.
Yeah.
And I feel like with you, Dino, you've taken the confluence of everything in your life, your skill sets and your strengths, and that's why you're able to bring such crazy value in dentistry. And I bet it's probably not even like work to you. Like, I imagine when you're there on the stage and you're doing these team transformations, which we're going to get into, like, it just kind of flows out of everything that you've come to learn and be. And that's why you're just so good at it. Like, I tell people, it's hard to work at something. If you want to perform all the time and have to fake it, well, then live out of alignment. But if you find a way to live more aligned to who you are, it's not gonna, you're not gonna feel like you're faking it, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny because when I go out to offices or I go to do private events, about 6 months ago, I did a private 8 hour long training for dental monitoring. And I knew what they wanted the objective to be. It was for their implementers. They wanted me to help them with their sales and how to implement it, how to enroll the team and all this stuff. But I remember the night before, I hadn't really written anything out. I don't use PowerPoints for the most part. I don't.
Wait, 8 hour training?
Yeah, I nothing. Like I had, so I pulled out I have one of those notebooks, the digital notebooks, right? And Remarkables. Yeah, I have one of those, and I remember just in the hotel room going like, okay, let's see, I want to talk about this and this and this, and I have a process that I use anyway for how to train. It very specific. I was taught it years ago. So I just started filling in the blanks of, okay, data, okay, exercise, all right, partner share, group share, okay, data, extra, and just went and get there on the next morning, start 8 hours later, I'm done with the training. I'm ready. I can do more if you want me to, right? I just love it when I'm just in that moment and flow and just feel what's needed from them, ask them questions. Oh, let me help you out with that. Let me help with that. My wife had said to me one time when I was really stressed about an event or something, she just goes, Dino, you know your material. Like, why are you stressed out about it? And it was this aha, when people tell you something you already know, but it's news to you. It's this aha of like, yeah, that's true. I do already know this stuff. Which is to contrast when I have something like the team transformation experience, that's a 6-hour event that I have to have timed out really, really well because I have breaks I have to put in there. I have a guest speaker. I have specific timing. And so that stresses me out more because I have to be confined to this time and PowerPoints, and because it's virtual, so everybody has to see certain slides and stuff. So it's a bit of a challenge when I'm confined. I've always said, give me 10 minutes prep for a speech. You want it 60 minutes, you want it 90 minutes, give me 10 minutes prep. No worries. I got you. I will entertain the crap out of everybody. I will teach them things. I love it. I love walking on that tightrope.
That is just amazing. Okay, so looking at your journey, can you identify like a mindset that you either needed to embrace or a mindset that you needed to shed in order to get to where you're at today?
Oh, the shed one's easy. I mean, and I still deal with it a lot. I like to make everybody happy. I don't want anybody to be pissed off at me. So that's a big one of like, how can I
please everybody
and be everybody's friend? That's so there. There's a lot of trust issues. One big one I had to get rid of. My wife actually called me out on it once after I gave a speech for Dental Town. How about, I don't know, 8 years ago. I was asked to do a little TED Talk type thing for Dental Town. And of course, going into something like dentistry or ortho, I was aware that I'm standing in front of a group of doctors and I barely graduated high school. And so there's that feeling of, I'm not good enough to be, why are these guys listening to me? And I would try to mask it with my confidence and things like that. And this speech I gave was talking about the suicide rates amongst doctors, because that's really why I got in this industry, when I found out about the suicide rates and stuff like that. My mission is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst private practice owners and their team members. So that all came from this whole situation. And I'm talking about how we need to do better and we need to talk about it more and be a little more vulnerable. And at one point I said something that wasn't something I planned. And I said something about how, listen, you're a bunch of doctors, you're smart people. I know I barely graduated high school and it's hard to listen to somebody like me, but I'm telling you this, something like that. I don't remember how bad it was, but
you downplayed yourself.
Yeah, totally. At the end of everything, like I gave this 18-minute speech, in the last minute, I say something like that. Oh my gosh. Like I get off, and Shannon my wife, she doesn't go to a lot of my events, but she was definitely that one. And she was upset about something. You know how you can tell your spouse is just not happy. And she's trying to be nice, but because there's other people around talking. And finally a break comes and she just goes, don't you ever do that again on stage. And I was like, what did I do? And she's like, you totally downplayed you. You downplayed that you aren't good enough to be talking to these people. You're giving them a message they need to hear. No one else is saying it. And she just kind of reamed me. And I'm probably remembering it even harsher than it was. But in my head, it was this, you're right. Like, why did I do that? And from then on, I've always just had it in my head of, you know what? People will hear what they need to hear. They'll take it for what it is. I have a gift and education that they don't. So I'm handing it. And so that mindset of shift of like, you know what? Everybody needs help. Everybody's hiding something. Everybody's working on something and scared about something and needs to be more vulnerable about something. And so that was a big mindset shift that I had to drop in our industry. I don't know.
So
yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, you kind of went over it fast, but please repeat your mission, because that is like profound.
Yeah. My mission is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst private practice owners and their team members. And that's what I do every day. Like, that's the goal. That's what wakes me up every day. That's where I focus everything. That's why my core values are what they are, because that's my mission, my vision for what I do.
So our listeners, imagine for a moment, 20, 30 years ago, Dino decided to play it small, and he decided to believe the self-doubt and everything about how he's not enough, or he's really not ready, or that's too risky, or there's not enough certainty, or whatever it was. You wouldn't be able to have already made the impact you've made just to this point. Forget the next decade, Dino. Like, I'm super excited to see how brightly you're going to shine, but I'm just saying, this is my whole belief, is I'm wanting those people that are still on the sideline and they're in their heads and they're talking themselves out of it because they don't have this clear path ahead of them. There's not a guarantee they're going to succeed. Just do it. Like, step out now. Like, tomorrow is too late. Just do it today. like right now, just step up and step out, because I feel like the confluence and the synergy that comes when I meet you and all of a sudden I hear what you're doing, Dino, it just like makes my fire want to burn brighter, because I'm energized. Like, oh my gosh, I'm inspired, and I don't want to have the regret of what I could have done, but decided to play it safe. To me, the power of regret, I think, is amazing. And I don't want to live that way. So thank you for not playing it small. And just like your wife said, like, don't ever play small again, Dino. We need you to make the impact that only you can make.
I appreciate that. It's one of those things where I don't know if I had I was always do whatever in school. I was in the plays and in the choir, and I was the only male cheerleader in my high school and stuff, because I was always willing to just be like, I want to have fun. Like, that's all. Like, I want to have fun and make an impact on myself and my life and all that. But I have a speech where at one point I have everybody take their cell phones out, and this goes to what you just said a moment ago. Take their cell phones out and shine it up in the air. And I said, sometimes it's really hard for us to shine our own lights because people can see that light, right? It's like people will be able to point you out and say, oh, you said this or you did that because you put your light up. What you fail to understand is the purpose of the light is twofold. Number one, yes, to shine your light. But number two is you illuminate other people and allow them to step into a light. And then maybe they'll do something with it. They'll realize that it's not so bad in the light. Right. And so I appreciate that, because I think it's a disservice. Anybody listening to this right now, if you have a dream, a goal, a desire, even, it doesn't have to be huge, whatever it is, I think it's a disservice. I think it's actually rude. It's just rude not to go for it and do it. And always, my company is called actually Our Ripple Effect, and there's a ripple effect that happens, right? And you are going to affect somebody. Friday this last Friday when I had the team transformation experience, one of the things I talk about very, very clearly with everybody is, I believe you're learning all of this and I'm teaching all of this because within the next 2 to 3 weeks, someone will come into your life who needs to hear this, and you'll be able to say, hey, you know what? I was at this event and I heard this thing. This might help you out. That's the point of, I think, life is you never know what's going to help somebody, some stranger, somebody else out in your life. So it's really, I love seeing people just be in their genius and be awesome at what they do. So much fun.
That is so awesome. Like, I think of it like we're all holding a line in advancing dentistry together. And when you look to the right and your left, there's still some vacancies where it's like, we don't know who's supposed to occupy those, but we want them to step up and own their strength, because the synergy of what is possible.
Yep.
Like I always tell people this, maybe it's just because I'm also an idea guy that's entrepreneurial. Like, who knows, Dino, if me and you are going to be sitting on a board together in 7 years, with 8 other people doing something awesome in dentistry, simply because we now know each other. There was some parallel, there was some way that we could both add value. And that's only possible because you showed up and stepped up and I stepped up, and for everyone that's afraid of, like, see, Dino, you may never have been this way, but I actually was a cynic for a while. I was like, I was the guy on the sideline that was like super judgy about, like, oh man, look at the way that person takes the offering, or look at the way that person's speaking. I could do better. And then I thought about it and I'm like, well, but I'm not trying. I'm not stepping up.
Yep.
And then the second you step up and get in the game, man, you're not going to throw darts at other people that are giving their best too. All of a sudden there's just like this grace of, like, you know what? If you're in the arena and you're giving it your best and you're being good by people and like have a code of ethics, power to you.
Like, yeah, there's a saying, somebody said, I'm going to mess it up, but basically, like, you'll never hear criticism from somebody who's doing something better, or doing what they want to do, or doing something, that they care about. They're doing something like that. Like usually criticism comes from people who aren't doing what they want to be doing. So they got to tear you down. It's that whole saying of, there's 2 ways to build the highest building in the city: tear all the other buildings down, or build the highest building. Right.
I have never heard that, but that is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the board thing. It's so crazy. Probably 10 years ago, probably a little bit more than that, I just happened to know a guy who knew a guy who asked me if I would MC his book launch here locally. And it's this guy, Rich Christensen, super nice guy, great, brilliant business mind. And I said, sure. So I go and I went in to MC. I had a background in MCing in Hollywood. And so I went to MC it, and we just got along so great. He was so grateful for it. Cut to about 6 months ago, I get this random email from Rich connecting me with some guy who's on a board, or he's an auditor for a company looking for a board member. Rick suggested me. Cut to, I'm a part of this board. It's the clinicians report with Dr. Gordon Christensen. I don't know who he is. I don't know what this is, but they reach out. I'm on this board now. And I'd say this to people, and people are like, wait, you're on that board? I'm like, yeah, I was just, yeah, it's cool. I had no idea that connection with Rich 10 years ago is going to lead me to be on one of the most popular reports, one of the most important nonprofits in the industry. Like, how would I know that? But it's because I just was willing to say yes to something and go out there and do it.
And because you play the long game, where
Yeah.
you don't take shortcuts at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
You don't step on people to get ahead. You have this long-term game of, I'm just going to keep providing value, leading with honor. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's a slower, but in the end, it's the only way to do it. So, Dino, I'm curious, because it seems like a lot of the entrepreneurial genes or traits kind of have come more natural to you. Have you still experienced one of those like dark nights of the soul where maybe you didn't want to get out of bed, or you weren't sure what was up ahead, and you were kind of thinking, man, like, if there ever was a time to give up or give in, this would be it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, truly, you're going to have those for sure, right? It's the roller coaster ride. 2008, I think it was. We lost almost everything. I had done some really bad investments. I was doing the business marriage program, and I had cars repossessed. I couldn't pay our mortgage. We were like 3 or 4 months behind on our mortgage. I had to go and work doing door-to-door sales, selling house alarms, home alarms, like with, back then it was called Apex, now it's called Vivint. During the summer in Yuma, Arizona, 120-degree heat. I was hating every moment of it. And you can't not think poorly of yourself. And I am not exaggerating when I'm saying only 3 months prior, probably 4 months prior, I was making about $30,000 a month passive.
Wow.
With these investments. We were in Jamaica with my kids on a vacation when I got the call, and it was all part of, people who know Bernie Madoff and all that stuff. It was all part of that I didn't know. It was like way down the list of things. And we got nothing, like nothing overnight. Income stops. It's funny. I hadn't thought about that, about the contrast between that and COVID. I'll explain that in a moment, but yeah, for sure. I was dark night of the soul for sure. I never went so dark. My brother, this was later on in life, but my brother 4 years ago took his life. I never got that far, but it definitely was not a happy moment for me. And the only way I got out of it, and I was just talking to my daughter about this recently, is every door I knocked that was going to reject me or wasn't home or whatever in the hot sun, I said to myself, I will tell this story from the stage one day. This is not the end, right? I'm going to make money for my family. I'm going to save our home. I'm going to do what needs to be done because that's what I got to do. But I knew this would be part of the story, not my story. And the funny thing about contrasting that is with COVID, when everything shut down and everybody dealt with that, when the government came in and said all the offices have to shut, we were having our best year ever business wise. I only take on about 10 to 12 clients a year, and it's all high level. And when I heard that, I had one client in California at the time who called me to say, I can't be at our meeting today. I got to shut down the office. I turned to my wife and I said, we've got to pause all of our doctors' retainers right now. And that meant literally overnight, we went to zero income. Zero. There was no residual. We don't have any money coming anywhere. Zero money. And luckily we had saved up enough money. We had good savings over the last 2 years, and we had just sold a house and things like that. But the other thing I said, in contrast to that time where I was losing everything, was I am going to deliver more value than I've ever delivered before for free. I'm going to do more webinars. I'm going to do more conferences. I'm going to do more speeches, all virtual. I ended up writing a book about it. I ended up, doing a whole program around how to sell virtually for doctors to be able to keep their business going. But it was a huge contrast that I really haven't thought about, the differences between that, as you said, dark night of the soul, where I did not want to get out of bed. I was not happy. The only thing I got me out of bed is I had 3 kids I had to feed. Like, that was it. To solutions provider, to, okay, I'm going to not have any money again, but I'm going to add massive value. And because I made that decision, everything started rolling into place more and more and more and more and more and more for my business. And so it's really interesting to think about that.
I mean, Dino, you just said so much there. Even I love that little part where you said in 2008, this is part of the story.
Totally.
It's not going to be my story.
Yep.
Like, that is so profound. It's all about the narrative we even allow, like, to be written as we're going through life.
Yep.
It's like, is this moment, is this challenge, is this darkness going to, I just said this on the last podcast, but who cares? Almost be like one of those moments where, just like a phoenix getting to rise out of the ashes, it's a defining moment.
Yep.
It's a moment where, just like that coal under pressure, you can become a diamond that now can shine in a way that you never could have had that resilience had you gone through. And no one says, hey, look, sign me up for the struggles. Like,
Yep.
I'll go head on into the suffering, into the trauma, into the tragedies. But I find it's in those moments that you can actually find like the most gold.
All right, I'm
You
going
know?
to give you a word that you probably haven't heard before, but it describes it's actually the scientific word of what you just said. Do you know what the scientific word is for that coal becoming a diamond versus not?
No.
It's called perturbation. It's the root word is perturb. And we all go through this, right? We go to the gym after not going to the gym. 3 days later, body hurts, don't want to move. Why would I do this? Your brain's saying, stop it. This is going to kill you. Go back to the couch, right? That's perturbation. And so that moment where the coal becomes, it either like molecularly, it says, I'm either going to push forward and become the diamond, or I'm going to pull off that pressure and become sludge. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. Like, this is blowing my mind away because I feel like there's so many moments, you know, in my own life that I find a way to almost wriggle out of the pressure.
Yep.
And I somehow redefine what the story is to be like, well, that was more of an option. I didn't really need. And yet I think I just need to like stay the course.
Push forward, lean into it, right? That's the key, is lean into it. It's
so
no one gets out alive, right? So we might as well push forward. Might as well lean into it. It's where the coolest stories are too, though, right? When you think about all your cool stories that you tell, all the stuff you get to build upon, it's always when it was the worst of times and then suddenly it was the best of times.
Well, the irony is, like, you know, I watch movies like Lord of the Rings or, you know, like Braveheart. And in Lord of the Rings, I'm like, yes, like I would love to be one of the hobbits that has this crazy adventure, but more likely than not, I would have just stayed in the Shire. Like,
sure.
You know, and I would have made excuses as why.
Sure.
And in Braveheart, I want to be William Wallace, but I find out most of the time I'm Robert the Bruce.
He's an ancestor of mine, so, you know, but true. Yeah, no, that's true.
And that's the thing. It's like, I love hearing the stories because it almost just like makes it okay to live the messy life that, I don't know, like that's what unites all of us in humanity, is that it's messy. It's unpredictable. There is no guarantees. And if there was a guarantee, would we want that? Like, truly, would we actually enjoy that?
Well, you said something earlier that I think is so profound about regret, right? And just living your life in regret. And I'm worried definitely about some of the things that I want to do that I haven't gotten around doing it, that I will regret not doing, you know, not things like skydiving or something like that. But I have so many things I want to experience and do in life, even if it doesn't do anything, if it fails. I have a musical I want to write. I have a TV show that I have an amazing idea for. And I'll regret, I'll be on my deathbed and regret that I didn't do it, but I'll just regret the experience of it. The things that really matter are the things I don't want to sit back and regret. I will never regret marrying my wife, for sure. I'll never regret having my kids. I'll never regret trying out a new crazy dance routine on my speeches, right? I'll never regret. So those type of things are, I'll never regret starting different businesses, no matter if they failed or not. It's just, I want to live in a space where it's okay to have some regrets, but on the stuff that really matters, to just try it. And there's a lot of stuff that I tried that I thought for sure I wanted to do, and then I was doing it and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, it's okay.
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy because I've heard people talk about like, hey, until you put something out into the universe, meaning until you speak a thing or really let people know, no one knows how to help you. And even as you just said, I would love to have a musical or whatnot. Like, I'm sure, who knows who might be listening to this episode and might be being like, wow, like maybe Dino and I can get together because he offers this side. I have this expertise. And then, but without saying it, no one knows. Yep. Like, no one knows. So you just encouraged me to, I don't know, just maybe be more courageous and bold about the visions that I see and the dreams that I want to accomplish. Dino, you are just fascinating.
Well, let me tell you this one last thing that I want to piggyback on that. There's a book called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. And in it, he talks about how to create your vivid vision and how to be really really specific about what you want out of your business and life and stuff like that. But the key thing that he talks about, to piggyback on what you just said, was he said, once you have your vivid vision laid out, and his vivid vision like is usually 3, 4, 5 pages long. It's not just like this statement. He says, you should give it out, print it out, and give it to everyone, your delivery man, all of your employees, your family members at Christmas time, because the only way it's going to happen and happen faster is if everyone knows about it, because they're the ones who are going to deliver it to you. They're the ones who are going to make the connection to this guy, to that guy, to this guy. So yeah, you have to speak it. You have to just tell everybody what it is.
Somehow, I'm like, that got me thinking about something with dentistry and with dentists. And I'm drawing a blank right now, but it had to do with, I think one of the things that also stops dentists is they have this sense of respect, maybe, or expertise already in their role as a dentist. Maybe it's a clinician, or maybe it's a leader. And then all of a sudden, if they get this idea about something that's maybe not clinical, maybe it's more on the business side, more entrepreneurial side, it almost feels like, well, yeah, but what if people see me try something that I am not good at, right?
Sure.
And yet everyone has to start in that beginner mindset again as kind of a newbie that has to, but I feel like that's one mindset that holds people back. Like if you're listening right now and you're like, oh, but I already have such respect in my community, people see me as an accomplished professional, don't let that be the reason why you don't follow the dream of your heart, because you're going to miss out on fulfillment later. So yeah, don't let that happen. So Dino, I want you to talk about what it is that you've been doing, because I want our listeners to know about this team transformation experience that is so out of the box.
Well, even though it's not dentistry, what you just said was exactly what got me into this, because I'm coaching and I'm consulting with these offices and I'm speaking on stages, and I've had this dream for a very long time to do kind of like a Tony Robbins 2-day personal empowerment, personal development event with teams, because I love working with teams so much. And I feel like it's my calling to really help, especially team members. I think doctors go to events where you're kind of exposed maybe a little more to self and personal development and as a business leader. And not a lot of time teams are. So I feel like I really get to do that and be that catalyst to people that are in the offices, to teach them mindset differences and how you can have more in your life. And so I wanted to do this for a long time, but there's a lot of logistics, right? How do you get doctors to get whole teams to come out to Utah for 2 days? And there's a lot of expense to it. And it obviously, as a business owner, it has to make money, right? It can't be doing a charity out of it. So my wife, about last September, I think it was, I was telling her about this, and man, I just really wish I could. And it's one of those on the list of things Dino wants to do things. And finally she goes, they don't have to come to you at first. You could just start it off as a virtual event. You did write a book about how to put on virtual events. And I went, oh my gosh, that's so smart. Like, what am I?
Sorry, this moment of like your wife being like, Dino, like, see this? Yeah. Do you see that?
I know.
And you're like,
what I tease her about is, I'm like, you've known about this for years. Why are you just talking about this now? Like, what took you so long? So of course I gotta, all arguments are just fighting to be the biggest victim, right? In any argument, especially with your spouse. And so that's where I'm like, well, you could have done this. So she says, do this thing. And I went, man, that's a great idea. Well, there's a company here in Utah that I do some work for. They're a real estate company, and I do some training for them. And they have a really cool setup. They have an awesome stage with, LED screens behind it and multi-camera and lighting and all this stuff. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, if I did this event, could I use your stage? And they're like, absolutely. We love what you do for us. Really appreciate it. Again, building on relationships that I've already kind of given. And so we decided to launch the Team Transformation Experience. I didn't want it to be an event. It's an experience where we create a live, interactive, digital experience for people and teams where you work together with your team. It's not individual Zoom meeting, right? You're together with your team in the office, and we give out like maps on how to set up your room so we can see everybody from the camera. We talk about how to go into the event. We send people wow boxes on stuff that they can use in there. And I don't even have it next to me. This one, we gave them little Dino bobbleheads of what would Dino do bobbleheads, right? And we want to make an experience where we have them using their phones to answer questions that we can all see. And it's 6 hours of, and the first one in January, it's all about getting ready for the year. It's the kickoff, right? Accountability, goals, focus, the 1% difference. And then this, the one we did on Friday, is the June one. And that's how to grow together unity wise as a team, because, you know, things stress out a little more in the summer when it gets a little busier, right? And so grow together, unity, communication, connection, collaboration. And we put on a 6-hour event unlike anything else out there. It's the only one that I know of in the world for teams in general, let alone dental and ortho space. And we did the first one in January. We had 53 teams, 630 people. And then in this one, we had a little less. We had 32 teams and about 400 people. The next one, though, in January, our goal is to get 100 people in there, 100 offices, I should say, in there. And, you know, it's $5,000 for your entire team, not per person. I mean, if you look at some of these things where you're going out to
you have to travel,
ADA, and you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on travel and everything else. And it's something that you're not quite sure what you're going to get back in return, right? Because you go to New Orleans with your team members and they're going to get drunk and you never know what's going to happen. And I've seen some horror stories. And so here you have a very specific area, and we have a lot of fun with it. And yeah, we just want to grow it and grow it and grow it. It's so much fun. It's a blast.
You know, I can't imagine over 400 people virtually.
Yeah.
That you are interacting with for 6 hours.
Yep.
I mean, that takes a special person. But again, with everything that you've done, it almost leads to this place where I don't want to say it's a natural, but it's like, who better to do it than you?
Well, it's the muscle that's been built, right? There's a great book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And it's actually a line from Steve Martin's book that he wrote his autobiography, where that's where he had to decide as a comedian, he had to be so good they couldn't ignore him because people didn't get his comedy at first. And the point of the book is, and not Steve Martin's, but in Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, is everything that you have done in your life from when you were a kid, especially when you started in the workplace and stuff, you never know what is going to be the thing that adds on top of the thing that adds on top of the thing that adds on top of the things to build the muscle to get you to this ultimate place. I never in a million years, when I was in Hollywood and I was, you know, DJing parties and emceeing game shows for corporate events, thought that that skill would help me stand alone on a stage for 6 hours, but it does, right? I know how to entertain people. It does. So yeah, it's really interesting. And everybody has that. Everybody listening to this has that. You've built upon a muscle that built upon a muscle that built upon a muscle.
And that's what I love. I always try to remind listeners, like, we're saying certain things, but it's really what they're hearing between what we're saying.
Sure.
That matters. Like, they know exactly what just came to mind of like, oh my gosh, that's a muscle that I have, but it's almost like a tool that I've left on the shelf.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't incorporated that into, you know, what I'm doing vocationally. And it's like, well, maybe it's time, you know, maybe dentistry needs that.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Over the next decade of your life, if that was a chapter in your book, what would that chapter be called?
The next decade is my chapter?
The next decade.
So the next decade of my chapter, so the chapter is going to be called Own Your Role. It's something that I'm really recognizing is so needed in our industry and in myself right now. And when I talk about own your role, I mean, when people ask you what you do, instead of telling them the title or the process of what you do, talk about the impact you make on them. And my next decade will be about owning the role of someone who inspires people, someone who connects with people, someone who transforms multiple people's lives. And then the subchapter will be Oh yeah, and I wrote a musical. And I spent an almost from the outside ridiculous amount of time with my wife. Like that's the coolest.
I love this.
Like one of my favorite things in the world. I do everything I do so I could run errands with my wife whenever I want to. That's so much fun to me. So yeah.
Dino, that is so beautiful. You know, I talk about with one of my, you know, greatest friends in dentistry, Dr. Allison House, that so many people that are achievement driven might end up, like the worst thing, I guess, would be to end up being at the top of a mountain that you've climbed and realizing no one else is there.
Oh, gosh, that sucks.
Right?
Oh.
Like, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we can't share it with the people that we love.
I literally got chills when you said that. That sucks. Like that depresses me to no end.
Well, and that's what I love about your mission. It's like your mission is to make sure people stay aligned so that all the sacrifices they're making. Dentistry's tough. Dentistry's so tough. Like, you know, I honor every single dentist that stays in the trenches to keep doing what they're doing. But it's even tougher if you're doing it out of alignment with who you are and you don't have your best friend at your left and your right, and your team isn't, there's not respect there and admiration and you know, a culture that's life-giving. It's just so much harder.
Listen, at the end of the day, like I used to say this a lot in my marriage courses, and this is just true to piggyback on your top of the mountain thing is, you know, we're all of us will get into a place where we're laying in a bed, hopefully like with loved ones around us. And there's really only going to be a certain set of eyes that you're going to care are looking down on you and you're looking into. That's it. Now, you can add your kids to that for sure and all that stuff, but number one is this person that I shared my entire life with or shared a majority of my life with. I'm blessed enough. I know this is a really odd story, but I'm so grateful. I've known my wife since I was 5 years old. We were backdoor neighbors. We've been married now. This year will be 29 years. We're not perfect. We have some crazy good fights, right? Because I like to be a victim sometimes too, right? And so does she.
You're like me.
You know, but at the end of the day, nothing matters except for the relationship you build and relationships. But I don't look forward to it. Like, I'm not rushing it, but I visualize laying in that bed, my head on a pillow. I know it's getting to the end and looking up and seeing those amazing green eyes. That's the best.
Every time you say that, it hits me. Like, I'm not expecting to get hit by that.
Me neither.
Like,
Me neither.
There's such a weightiness to it, and I just wasn't expecting that. So, okay, so Dino, if someone's listening right now and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want to learn more about the team transformation experience, or how I can, you know, reach out and maybe connect," and I know Dino only offers really high value coaching or consulting, but if they're interested in any of those things, where do you want them to go?
Yeah. Yourteamtransformation.com is the best place to find out about the next event. The one in January is, I believe it's the 18th. It's a Thursday, third Thursday of the month in January. And then just dinowatt.com is my speaking site, and Dino Watt Consulting is my consulting site. And that lets you know more about the Own Your Role process and all that.
Okay. So Dino, we have one more question. I don't know are you ready for it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so here you are. You're walking down the street, and off in the distance, you see 18-year-old Dino.
18-year-old?
And 18-year-old.
He's an idiot.
And you know you only have one moment to communicate one brief sentiment. What do you share to him?
Don't wait. Stop waiting. Don't wait. Don't care. Like, don't wait. Don't care. Care about the people you care about, and that's it. But do not care about what other people are thinking or saying or doing. And this is still what I'd say to 50-year-old Dino right now, right? It's going to be repetitive, but don't wait. And I know it almost sounds cliche, but don't wait. I mean, I thought I was doing a lot. I think I still have done a lot in my life, but I could have done so much more.
Dino, that's like the perfect like bow on top of this entire conversation. Like for anyone listening, that sums it up. Like just go. Like step out. Now is the perfect time. Tomorrow's too late. And don't care about what other people might think. Like don't wait for that.
Yeah.
Dino, it has been just an honor and a privilege. And it's been so easy to honor you as an innovator. As you can tell, like naturally, I've just been incredibly fascinated by the way you think, the way that you've overcome. And I'm so thankful that you have overcome the way that you have, just so that you can release the value that you've released in dentistry. So
Wow.
thank you so much.
I'm honored
for
to be
letting
here.
me. Yeah, thank you for letting me interview you today.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it. You're great at it. You're a great interview.
Thank you, Dino. Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow so you never miss an episode. To learn more about what's going on in dentistry, check out innovationindentistry.com.